As marketers, we work hard to generate quality leads for our sales team. And when those leads come in, we expect our sales colleagues to jump on them right away. But here's the reality. Sales teams are often overwhelmed with information and really struggle to prioritize effectively. This means hot leads can slip through the cracks, wasting our marketing efforts and then missing out on valuable opportunities. In this episode, we're diving into the world of sales and marketing alignment. And one of the biggest things to drive alignment is handling those hot leads that come through. So we'll show you how to use automation to ensure your sales team gets notified about new leads with all the context they need to take quick, well-informed actions. So get ready to transform your lead handoff process and tackle the best opportunities right away. I want to probably start getting everything teed up here. Like something that we see a lot is like clients having this marketing and sales alignment, right? There's a challenge there between those two teams quite often. So like, what are some of the things that you see when marketing has done its job and they're actually trying to get those leads into the hands of sales? Like, what are some of the things that you see?
Yeah. I think honestly, part of it is there is this often like hands-off approach, like marketing did it, toss over the fence, and we're done now, sort of thing. But I think it often comes down to two maybe primary challenges. I think the first one is a lack of information. So sometimes salespeople will get, maybe it's just like a task in the CRM with no context, and it just says call this person, right? And they don't know their journey, what assets they've interacted with, what even pages they've been on. It's really nothing beyond go call this person, they've reached out, sort of thing. And so that's that requires then a manual process of researching this person, going on their LinkedIn, diving into the company, trying to dig around to connect the company with the likely pain points of the product. And there's just this manual process. And so it's no wonder really in many ways when they're not given any context why salespeople aren't jazzed every single time a lead jumps over the fence. Is sometimes it's a lot of work for nothing. So that context or that lack of information is definitely one. I think the other piece of it too that's fairly common is a lagging notification. So sometimes, I think I mentioned this a little bit, like a lead will land in some MQL list that they're supposed to review regularly, but they're busy just like marketing teams. Everyone is busy and they might not get to look at it for a day even, but timing is so critical with this stuff that's a missed opportunity. They call, the person might have forgot they even filled out the form. That is a common story that happens. So I think lack of information is one, lagging notifications is one. But I think maybe you could summarize all of it in part of your question, honestly, that marketing is kind of, they feel like they're done, but sales hasn't really started yet. There's this gap that happens.
Yeah. And Grant, based on some of the work that you're doing and what you see, Jacob's talking about the lack of information that's even available and the timing of it, right? So, sales can lose out on opportunities. What are some of the things that you've seen working with teams, maybe around the actual impact, maybe lost opportunities, lost revenue, if this communication doesn't happen? What does that look like on your side?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's that expression, if the tree falls in the middle of the forest and no one's around to hear it, like, did it fall? If a lead becomes an MQL and no one's checking the list, do you have an MQL, right? And I think that causes frustration on both sides. Like, always got to keep in mind the qualitative side of this, like team angst. There's always kind of like that sibling rivalry between marketing and sales. Like, my leads aren't good, I don't have any leads, we're doing our best, like that whole back and forth. But then if you do get a good lead and no one's aware of it, then that's just straight up revenue potential lost, right? That's dead pipeline. And it'd probably be beneficial for people to have some sort of like dashboard that says dead pipeline if it goes cold after a certain number of days. I think that would be something that really hits the cognitive depths, that says, oh wow, we were just too slow. It's like that speed to lead thing. So we definitely see that on our side too.
And on the manual side, Grant, because I know you're replacing a lot of manual workflows, right? And you're enhancing those with a lot of the work that you do. So what are you seeing, like, if we take away automation and some of these workflow enhancements that you're doing, like, what is that manual process like? What are some of the things that you see right now without that type of technology involved?
Yeah. So let's say MQL pops up, they come over the fence, as Jacob was saying. You would want to go in and find out, are they our ideal customer profile? So what's on their website? Some people are looking, do they have a book a call page, or is it self-service? What's their revenue? What's their Alexa search rankings? Like, there's so much about what the company is getting from a marketing perspective, what they're selling, what their sales motions are like, depending on what your service is. But you got to go and check all that stuff out. You might have to go to Clearbit. You might have to go and do, an in-depth 30-minute audit of their site, go through all the different pages, prepare for that call. So there is a healthy amount of work that goes into that, all the way from on-site analysis to going to their LinkedIn profile and seeing, are they hiring roles right now? Who's their CTO? There's a lot of different ways to spin that depending on what you're selling, but at the end of the day, it's work.
Yeah. And let's figure out how to do that work better and faster. So Jacob, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Let's start to take a look at how we could make this process more smooth for folks, especially small teams they're trying to get that alignment in place, and they're trying to really jump on opportunities as soon as they come across. So Jacob, walk us through at a high level this envision workflow that we could put in place for teams, and then we'll have Grant then actually show a demonstration of what this will look like. But I'll kick it to you to walk through the screen share here.
Perfect. So this will look different for different organizations depending on their tool set, their workflow. I've called out a couple tools here. Grant, as we get into the weeds of what this looks like from an automation standpoint, uses some of these, uses different tools. So the point is that we categorically check these boxes from a technology standpoint. So we'll dive into this, but when it comes to notifying your team, getting your sales team attention, and filling that gap between the kind of marketing to sales handoff, there are really 4 stages to building what we're talking about today. The first one is the actual collection of information. So every company will have some sort of website form, right? It might be a Gravity form, it might be a type form, it might be a tally, it might be, there's a bunch of different tools, but whatever it is, they're collecting information from the clients. Now, that is obviously a starting point from a data standpoint, but as Grant was saying a moment ago, we want a lot more information. Before the salesperson is going to pick up the phone, they're going to want to know more about the company. They're going to want to know how big they are, how many employees, are they hiring? So there's a whole data set of information out there that goes beyond the couple boxes that the submission came through with. And a lot of companies will actually try to fill this gap by just adding more boxes to the form. And that's where you get these really unwieldy, 15 box forms that you're filling out. All of that is unnecessary with so many of the tools that we have. And so one of the main ones to enrich information like this is Clay. We'll talk about what that looks like, but really this step is just to gather as much information as we can about these individuals when they come through, and to do so very fast, which is why we're having this conversation around automation and not research strategies. Once you have that information, we're adding an AI layer here. And this is just a fast way to really digest, analyze, and summarize this information that we've collected in the previous step. So we'll again look through what that looks like. This can be customized depending on what the product is, what information really matters, what are the triggers for a company that might be ready to buy this service. And so what AI is doing here will vary, and what questions it's answering will vary, but we have a bunch of information, and so we need to analyze that information and summarize and create some content around it for the actual notification that we send out. Once we have the information, once we've analyzed it, summarized it, I'm using this phrase company digest creation, but really it's just analysis and summary. We want to do 2 things with that. And so number 1 is notification. These, as we've talked about already in this conversation, so much of sales is about timing. That handoff needs to be very fast, and it needs to be a robust handoff from an information standpoint. And so this, again, will vary depending on how your company handles communication. But once it's in these systems, you can kind of connect it to anything. So in this example, we're using an email notification and a Slack notification. So any IM tool or email platform will work with this, but we really just want to make sure that the salesperson immediately knows that someone has come in and that they need to take some action on it. And all this information from the kind of collection, the enrichment, and then the analysis is getting passed through to this notification. So it's not the usual, hey, Carl filled out this form, here's his name, email, and company, give him a call. It's a lot more of a robust kind of context providing resource. And we'll talk about, again, what that looks like in just a moment. Notifying it is a big piece, but we also want to keep that information for later, right? Slack and email, they're not great data collection or searching tools. And so we do want to integrate it with a CRM. So whether it's HubSpot, Salesforce, whatever, we want that information to be pushed into the CRM. And so again, this is a more robust version of what most companies do, where name, email, company gets shot into HubSpot. And it even goes beyond maybe the next step, or a slightly more advanced company will then start adding some enrichment to it as far as like company revenue and employees. HubSpot, for example, does a lot of that automatically. But because we're having this AI plus Clay layer, what we're able to do is create like a snapshot summary. We can add various activities. We can even do things if we get a little bit more advanced in like summarizing what they've done on the website, for example. So there's so much information that we can have here. We want to feed that into our key system of choice, often being a CRM, and then either create a new contact or append in a contact, depending on what the context is there. And we often, when we're building things like this, like to have some sort of logging tool. This is not something that we're constantly referencing, but it's a good database just to have everything in one place as well. So zooming out here, we'll dive into the details in just a moment with Grant here, but it's really 4 stages. Collect the information, enrich that information, summarize and analyze with AI, notify, and then keep this information for later. That's really, at least at a high level, the workflow. Obviously, it'll vary from company to company, but if you can take this is a pretty good starting point for doing what we're talking about today.
Yeah, and I want to jump into a couple things, Jacob, like literally zoom in. So if we look at that form fill, it's a point that you brought up where, if you have, like, I think a process like this is helpful to increase the speed that sales gets information. That's one, but it's also like taking some of that burden off of website visitors and just really making it simple. Like, we can collect your information and translate that or add to it using these other tools so that you don't have to fill out that form. So we're reducing the friction in that form fill. And I think that's a big piece here, is like if you start to implement these types of workflows, you can make things easier on your users. And that's really also a big impact on marketing as well, just on conversions. Like, we really essentially only need the email. We get the domain and everything from there, right? Like, break that down for me.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So instead of adding a bunch of different fields that we need to collect, to your point, if we have their email, we can enrich everything else. And I think sometimes even hearing that, we default to, okay, cool, we can just ask their email and we can get their company and industry and stuff. But it even goes another step beyond that in asking for very personalized information from their either the contact or the company. And so an example would be if they provide their email, we can find the website. And if you find the website, then we can use this AI layer to provide some guidance on the most likely pain points they're dealing with, right? So we've all also seen like some companies will add on their form like a why are you reaching out sort of question. And that's really trying to identify the pain point. But there will be a lot of, and again, this depends on the context of the company, but if you have a handful of ICPs, the salespeople will know that this type of company is going to deal with this type of problem, or maybe this size of company or this industry. And so we can actually start to really provide and analyze, number one, but then provide that information that's like far beyond just information. It's like a deeper analysis on how would this company use our product and what are the main problems they're dealing with. And when you use a tool like Clay, You can even get into situations, again, this is a lot more advanced, but Grant noted this earlier, where you could say, is this company hiring for this role? And if they are, you can make some assumptions about why they're maybe picking a vendor over hiring, or if they're hiring, how that you might work with that new hire instead of work against them. And so there's a lot of different variations on what this can look like. But to your point, the big thing to highlight in this submission enrichment analysis piece is that, I mean, hours of research can be done in a 30-second automation with this and go far beyond even information that the contact knows or is interested in typing out.
Got it. All right. So with this like high level overview of the process, and you walked us through those 4 key steps, Grant, why don't you translate this into actual technology and like, let's take a look at what things look like under the hood. Like, how does this actually get built out? So I'll kick it to you for this part of the screen share.
Yeah, let's do it. Alrighty, so this is a straightforward flow, kind of zooming out real quick if we want to see the whole picture. It's one linear flow with just a little bit of logic at the end, whether we have this person in our CRM or not. So if I zoom back in to the very beginning, we're going to be focused on that very first Tally submission. And so I chose Tally because it's a free form builder. It's really high quality with what you get with the free plan, and you can put it on any website. So very simple, just, hey, do we have a submission on our lead gen form? Now this is the cool part about this automation, is really the enrichment of data with Clay. So what I'm doing is I'm going into Clay. I built a table, which I'll show you here in a minute. And I'm going in and I'm saying, hey, save the submission ID. That way we have a record. The respondent ID, again, just for good data hygiene. Give us the first name, the last name, and the email. And that's where you could stop with just email, as we've said, right? We can grab the domain from there. But because this was a template in Tally, I went ahead and added the job title. We've got the company name and the company size. But again, as we've talked about, you could stop with just email. And so I'm going to quickly pop out of this, and I want to show you what this looks like in Clay. So here's the beginning of the table. Here's some fields you should recognize from Tally, and that's just for data hygiene. But as we go through this, right here at company size, that's where I'm stopping the data train here. Everything else is enrichment. And so I'm going across, and in a previous test case I was using HubSpot because it's a little bit more interesting on the number of roles they've got. But I've got their LinkedIn profile, I've got the company name, the total employee count, and we've got a few different data sources here, which I like to use just to have, to see what's the most accurate. So this is coming from the Clay standard versus when we get into some stuff with Clearbit, and again, we've got industry here, this is something we talked about. Once we get into Clearbit, we've got annual revenue, which we know because this is a public company. We've got a description from Clearbit, the year it was founded, again, an industry field, but then where are they based? Maybe a logo. If we wanted to download that later, we could. And then public or private, and the number of employees provided by Clearbit, which I found to be more accurate, just as a heads up. And this goes on and on and on, right? We can add so many more layers of enrichment. And what I tell people when you're using a tool like Clay, and really Clay specifically, it's really, if you can conceive it in your brain, you can get that type of data. Now that Clay has AI agents that can crawl websites, like you can just have a table of companies and have an AI agent go and see, do they have a book a demo button or do they have a pricing page? I mean, that's incredible, right? That is truly that is massively time saving. So this is just this is like the easy mode of Clay, but we'll hop back over into Zapier. And before I keep going, does anyone have any questions on what I've shown you so far?
Yeah, I think the big thing, Grant, is to ask is, and you hit on this point, it's like if you can imagine something, it can be done. So I think if you could real quick, like how do you start to think about something like taking Jacob's diagram, right, from a functional standpoint, and then translating that into actually jumping into Zapier? Like what goes through your mind when you're getting to this level here?
Yeah, absolutely. So the number one tool for an automator, I think, is this page on Zapier's website. It's just zapier.com/apps. And if I'm ever curious about anything in one of our clients' tech stacks, or if I'm curious what a tool like Clay can do, I can just search that tool and scroll down a little bit and see what all of the triggers and actions are. Now, this might not seem like much, but when you understand what everything in Clay can do and you combine that with what Zapier is able to do for connecting the CRM and all these different things, I mean, a world of possibilities has just opened up. I think Zapier connects with over 7,000 apps. Clay has a full suite of integrations on its own to tools like Clearbit. So you just multiply those together, we're talking about like hundreds of thousands of options. It's really something else. So it's a bit of curiosity, it's a bit of experience, and people just asking you for things like, hey, can we get email to revenue? Sure, let's go deeper. So it's a bit of just having the questions and being curious enough to ask the questions, and then using this Zapier page as kind of my not secret weapon, because I tell everyone about it, but it's the way that I do the majority of my research.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to note there, Grant, is marketers need to have this conversation too with sales, right? It's like, what do you need, or what would be helpful for you when a lead comes in? Like, what background information would you like to have at your fingertips when you're trying to assess whether, I need to jump on this, or, are they already in the CRM? Like, what kind of lead is this? It's like, what do you need to do your job better? And then it's like what you said, you're going to back into that data and try to figure out how to get that information in a process like this. So I think it was just a good way to connect the dots there, Grant. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopping back over to Zapier, now I put in a little bit of a delay here just for 1 minute, because that automation, we're essentially sending information to Clay and we're asking Clay to do something with it. But that's not, it's almost instantaneous by our measure, right? It takes 5 seconds, but just sending the information is not enough. We have to go and retrieve that information as well. So when you're building an automation like this, especially when you're using Clay for enrichment, it's important to put that delay in, to let the tool do its job and then come back. So we've got this retrieve step where we're going to go find all the information that's stored in there, and I'm just going to use that response ID. Remember, I was talking about data hygiene. I'm using that response ID as a way to go and pick up that nugget of enriched data. So then as we go into this, I'm sending that information to ChatGPT, and I kept these prompts pretty simple. We got the user message and the system message, which I will go over here for the instructions. I'll start here. You're a helpful sales assistant with 20 years of experience working with account executives. You work at GrantBot, a no-code automation agency that saves people time by eliminating $10 an hour tasks. Now the user message is more specific. This is what I'm asking it to do. Your goal is to synthesize the following information about the new lead in an easy to read 3 to 5 sentence summary for your account executive. And then I'm just pulling out all that information from Clay that we got. So you can see number of employees, the company website. You can see, is it public or private? Where are they located? When were they founded? What do they do? What's their revenue? And what's their industry? And then because I was having some fun with this, I said, can you also give me 2 to 3 talking points about how our services could be useful for this prospect? So this goes exactly to what you were talking about, Tristan, like that conversation between marketing, automator, and sales to say, hey, what are you looking for? And what could I do to make your job easier? In my head, my sales head, I think, I would love to have some talking points so that if I were to do a call or send an email, I know what I could say in the moment. So that's what I was looking for, and that's what I added to this summary.
Yeah, one thing, Grant, I want to point out here that I think is important is why Clay is even a little bit more powerful than maybe people realize is back to your scraping the website piece, like where Clay is actually able to go out and retrieve information on the web, right? And pull it back into the table, where you can't do that directly, at least right now to my knowledge, right? Through OpenAI, you can't do that in Zapier. Have it actually go like ChatGPT, where you can say, hey, look up this website and summarize what's on the page. You can't do that through Zapier. So Clay is kind of doing that, pulling it back into a table so that then we're sending all that information into basically this piece here where you're creating that whole prompt with all that information. Is that right there?
Yep, spot on.
And how do you approach prompting in automations as opposed to just prompting like yourself in ChatGPT on your second monitor sort of thing? Like, are there differences that you keep in mind or different approaches that you use when doing that?
No, I think you should think about it as a very similar experience. The only thing is, I'm using like a list-heavy format because I've got bullet points effectively, right? And if I was in ChatGPT, I would probably write it out the same way, like maybe with a little bit more fluff, like here's a description of the company, here's their annual revenue. Maybe I would add a little bit more if I just because of the way that I typically type into ChatGPT. But as far as like the theoretical, the quality of the prompt will dictate how good the output is. I think you should think about it the exact same way. I try to keep things pretty simple for this one. So if we move on to the notification piece of this, right? I got a Gmail module in here. I'm just going to email another email inside the company. It's the engineering team. Hopefully I don't bug them too much. It's coming from me. It's from the sales bot by name. And then I'm just saying new lead and the company name. And then in the body of the email, I'm putting that summary that ChatGPT created. And then in the Slack channel I'm putting it in the sandbox, but I would recommend you put it in your sales channel. I've got that summary there again, and it's coming from a bot with the new lead alert title. And then I always like to put a fun emoji on there. And I always say, link back, link back to this Zap in case anyone wants to edit it. So that's what this last one is here. I'll pause there. Any thoughts?
Yeah, what is that piece? Go back to edit the Zap. Why is that important, do you think, or why do you build that in?
I think it's, as we are always growing and thinking about what's going to be the next piece of information that's useful, or the small micro tweaks, when you've got a fully fleshed out automation, company, there's so many different places to look, and having good folder structures and everything in your Zapier account can be helpful. But this is just a small little thing that's like, hey, if I want to change this thing real quick, I'm just going to leave the link in there so I can access it really fast. It's a completely optional thing, but I've found that when you've got multiple cooks in the kitchen, someone might move something to a different folder. You don't know where it is super fast. Just to save you an extra second, it's like, oh, this app just came in. I want to actually add one more parameter to this, or I want to change the Slack bot's name. I can just click on that link.
Nice. It's a good touch. Jacob, I think that's something that we could start to put in a couple places.
I like that. That is fast.
I know I've built some Zaps, and I'm like, where is that?
Yeah.
I forget.
Yeah. And that you bring up a good point overall is that link is a fast way to edit it, but I don't think these things should be treated as like, I did this. Check, like this automation is done. That feedback from the sales team, our feedback, like you might find out in this example, we're obviously doing a simple one here, but the sales team's like, hey, this is great information, but I then have to open up a new tab, open up HubSpot, find that contact. Like, can you just link to that contact in the Slack? And the answer is, of course. We just got to add that in. So your link makes that much faster, but just approaching it overall, like it's a process. You're not done. You're just evolving it.
Correct. We're very much on the continuous improvement train at GrantBot, always thinking about how can we move this forward and be aware of how the team is also shifting the way they want to approach work. So getting into the final stretch here, we've got the event log in Google Sheets. So just quickly showing you guys this one. Quick little event log. We've got the tally response ID, the prospect name. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. I didn't even include all the records, or all the columns rather. So I'm just keeping a quick log there. And then we've got the search for the contact in the CRM. And this is that path I mentioned earlier. So we're going to use the email address as our source of truth for the CRM. And if that contact is not found, we'll create a contact. And if the contact is found, we'll update the contact. And so we can quickly pop into these two steps. All we're trying to do is get this information from Clay into a usable format in our CRM. And so we've got a few of these different job titles. Some of it's Tally, some of it's Clay. And on the other side, if it does exist already, we're just going to go ahead and use that object ID from the find step. So 9 was find the record. we'll use that record ID and update the rest of the fields. And an important piece of this is that this is a new lead, and so I'm going to mark that lead status as new. And that's going to be an important part of this for what I'll show you in HubSpot here in a second.
And with this grant, so like if, folks will fill out a form, they may or may not already exist in HubSpot. Is there something that you do there to check for a record first? Or like with HubSpot specifically, is it something where you check to see if it exists and then create if not, or how does that piece work there?
Yeah, good question. So anytime we're trying to update the CRM, you're definitely going to want to look and see, does this record already exist? So for most people, the CRM is dependent on the email address. You've got one email address per person. It would be weird, I would say, in most cases that someone uses a different email address in a business context and then a personal email address in the same business context. So for the most part, I think we can use the email address as the source of truth. And so in this find step, this step 9, we're going to use that first search property as email, and that is how we're going to find that record inside of HubSpot. So if that record is found, we can click into this path thing. Zap search was found status is true. Then we'll go down the contact found path. If it is false, down here, then we will go down the not contact found path.
Yeah, and I think that's important too, because it's like a good just route to take regardless of what's CRM you're using. So very similar process for HubSpot, Salesforce, etc.
Yep.
And I think that's the important thing too, is we're always just going back to that business process. And these things, it's nice when you're doing these types of workflows, because even though we see clients different CRMs all the time, these principles don't change. It doesn't matter which CRM you're in, et cetera. The data flow is really similar in all cases there. So thanks for covering that, because you see duplicate records all the time. That's like a whole different avenue to talk about, because if you don't have some of these things built in this app here, you do get down the road further, and you got to merge records, merge accounts. Your data is not clean, then you start to not trust it. So putting in things like this to check is important.
Yep, absolutely. And kind of adding on to your point about different CRMs, and kind of a Zapier logic point here, is that logically we think, oh, I just want to update the record, or I just want to create the record. But in order to do this Zapier no-code work, you do have to search first. And I don't think that's an intuitive step. People think, oh, I'm just going to update. But why? How are you going to update? How are you going to find if that thing exists? And if instead, on the flip side, we said, let's create a record every time. Well, if someone has just signed up for your webinar, but last week they downloaded a one-pager, then you're going to have 2 records for the same person, and that's going to be an issue. So we definitely want to make sure that we are treating these things with respect to how the data has to flow for data hygiene. That's a really important piece when you're building automation.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about the event log. I did want to ask about that. I know it's something that we started to roll out for troubleshooting, different points of the Zap that may fail or not go through. Can you talk about like your mindset when it comes to just tracking the different events?
Yeah, there's a couple schools of thought. You could use the Google Sheet as your kind of quick source of truth. You hop in and get to see, did every module get hit on the way to the final output? You could also use the platform's native search history or automation history, which is usually what we'll do. We'll have we'll click in and see, did this thing run to its end? A lot of the error handlers in these tools are pretty robust, so we'll use those a pretty good amount. And then we also have our own, I guess we use our tracking system over in Airtable, because we like the interface that you can kind of build on top of that. So we do a bit of both, but when it comes to really handling errors, I found personally I prefer the platform's native error handling interface.
Yeah, Jacob and I wrestle between Airtable, Google Sheets. We have a lot built out in Airtable too. I do like the interface better. You can kind of put things on top of the data much easier than Google Sheets. I mean, you're pretty much just stuck with the spreadsheet, but it is a nice and easy way to at least start that process. And I think that's something too I wanted to bring up is like you mentioned this earlier, Grant, where just with the link back to the Zap to edits, like phase one or version one of the Zap might exist, but then you're always like adding pieces or improving it along the way, and that's always something you can do. You could swap out Google Sheets and then simply make that an Airtable event log if you wanted to, because you have like the data flowing in that direction. You're just kind of adding a component or swapping something out, and I think that's also important for folks to realize. I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, continuous improvement. As long as everyone's on the same page that we're trying to get to the system that helps our team the most with the least amount of tech baggage, right? It's like making a tiny little change to add a column here or remove a field there. Like, it's better to do those in near real time when you have the thought rather than let them accrue, and then it's like, oh my gosh, our processes have changed so much that we actually have to re-architect this. So being in that state of kind of, we're always going to be looking for the best and most efficient way to do the process, it's better to keep the system updated in real time than it is to wait and let that simmer.
Yep, definitely.
And the last thing I wanted to show real quick is just what this end piece looks like in HubSpot. For people who might not have as much experience in HubSpot, you do get to look at saved views inside of your contacts. And so HubSpot has a few standard saved views like all contacts, but I created this new one called New Leads, which has a filter based on lead status. And so I pointed out earlier, we're setting that lead status to new, which means anyone that goes through this automation would pop in here. And if I wanted to, I could say, only show me the records where annual revenue is over $500 million, for example. HubSpot would pop in there, right? So we can set some additional filters based on the information that's coming in, which would allow instead of just having the MQL list, it would actually allow the AE to say, I want to look at just the contacts that I'm the owner of that are over $500 million in revenue. And that's a filter that we can then save in HubSpot and have a much cleaner, more targeted list for the AE to go and act on. So we're notifying them, but then we're also making their job really easy when they get into HubSpot because they've got their spot to look for things. So just want to make sure I pointed that out at the end of this whole thing.
Yeah, definitely. And Jacob, I'll kick it to you. Since Grant walked through the details, we got to see how this is built out in Zapier. Like, what do you see as the biggest benefit now that we kind of scoped this out together? Like, if you had to boil it down and say, hey, when we look back at marketing and sales alignment, what is maybe the biggest benefit of rolling out a notification process like this?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it boils down to you get just a better ROI for your leads. You get faster follow-up from the sales team who has a more robust notification system. They're more ready to reach out more quickly with better information. And then secondly, they're more prepared for that. The follow-up can be more individualized. You're not relying on, getting a certain salesperson who does the research necessary before making the call. You're providing that up front. And so I think at the end of the day, it's you're doing today what's necessary to avoid tomorrow's awkward conversation of like, where's the gap in providing better ROI? How could you guys work together better? Like, we're attacking that now. And so I think at the end of the day, you're getting better ROI, which impacts your budget and impacts, the growth of the company and overall. But that's probably what it boils down to for me.
Yeah, and Grant, when folks look to jump in and actually, build some of these automations here, like what are some things that they need to look out for? The gotchas that, we want to let them know to be aware of as they're starting to roll these types of things out?
Great question. I would say patience is a really important step in this, because if you don't know, for example, that you need to do a search for contact step and you're just like, I want to update this contact, I want to update it real bad, you might not know to look for search. But if you're patient and you say, great, let's go back to the HubSpot page on zapier.com/apps. Let's go check out what all the available options are. Oh, there's a find contact step. I wonder what that, maybe I should use that one here. It's like, it is a bit of an iterative approach when you're just getting started. And then also thinking in that if then process. That's the best framework for people who are getting into automation. If this thing happens, if someone downloads my white paper or someone attends my webinar, then enrich that data, then put it in my Google Sheet, then send a Slack message. It's a really easy way to get into the mindset of automation.
Got it. And Grant, I'll ask you, final question. Like, what do you think is the biggest takeaway, as we built this out for you, like that you would share with a small, scrappy marketing team?
Clay is powerful. I would really take some time to invest in just going on a few YouTube videos and seeing what Clay can do, because it's really one of those tools, just like Zapier, 7,000 connections. I'm not going to hit all of them. I'm not going to hit every use case in Clay. But if I get inspired and I go, wow, that's pretty neat, I wonder if I could do that, the right YouTube video could really change the way, change your game. Your whole lead list, how you're cleaning your leads, how you're processing them, how you're getting into your AEs. It's really one YouTube video away. So I would really encourage you. Zapier is great, awesome tool, but if you're in marketing and you really want to get some high ROI on a tool, I would say Clay is pretty dang powerful.
Yeah, Jacob and I have some ideas. We're even using it for content audits and such, because you can scrape websites and actually enrich the data there. So that's a whole separate episode that we'll get into. But Grant, I'll close things up. Where can people go to find out more information about you and the types of work that you do just like this?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Grant Hushek. I'm the only one there. And then my website is grantbot.co. Happy to have a conversation with anyone that's interested in automation.
All right, awesome. Well, Jacob, Grant, thanks. This was fun building this out, and hopefully some small, scrappy marketing teams can get some better alignment with their sales team, which is what we're all trying to do. All right, thanks, gentlemen.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely.